Oh, all right. Good Monday evening, you guys. It is an exciting evening because we have the lovely Fern here, which makes my head hurt every time I meet with Fern. I leave with a headache because I just learn so much from her. But for those of you guys that don't know her, or if you're watching the replay, Fern is the president of the Houston Writers Guild, and she is also owner of Inklings Publishing. And so she's here to talk to us about all the ins and outs of publishing, the back end of it. So all contracts, starting, building a really strong foundation is really kind of where she's going tonight, but I will let her tell you all about it. So Fern, take it away.
All right. So I figured tonight would be all about like just actually putting it together, right? The steps to actually creating your own publishing company, which, some of you probably already have done, like Rock Hill. I'm sure you've done much of what we're going to talk about today. But for those of you who have not yet gotten there, this is going to hopefully be useful. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. And all right, so setting up a small press basically is what we're going to talk about today. And of course, Inklings Publishing. Those of you who already know a little bit about us, we've been in business now. This is going to be our 8th year in business we're entering into. And we are a traditional publisher, so we pretty much fund all of our projects, just like you would with a big house, except that we're small, and we give our authors their royalties and all of that good stuff. And we try to get some retreats and things for authors from some of our profits that we can do. So the Houston Writers Guild, for those of you guys who don't know, I just recently became the president of the Houston Writers Guild. And basically it's a nonprofit volunteer run organization. We do a lot of different conferences and stuff, and we've got 2 things planned right now. Opening up is a contest. So if you guys want to enter into a contest, we are going to be producing an anthology called Women's Voices. So the stories all have to be about with female characters or female identifying characters, POVs, but you don't have to be a female to enter. You're just writing from a female perspective, empowering, inspirational, fiction and nonfiction. So narrative, true stories about women who have done things that are empowering, or fictional stories. Either one is good. And we're also doing poetry. So if you would like to throw in some poems, we are going to do a poetry contest alongside it. So these are contests. You'll have a chance to enter, get feedback, and win some prizes, and of course be published in the HWG Press anthology that's coming up this year. And we're getting prepared for our first conference. Every year we have a conference in spring. We've pushed it to June. It will be virtual. We already got 2 agents. So look for that information if you're thinking of pitching to some agents, maybe some additional work. And we are basically working on all those details. So that's a little bit about the Houston Writers Guild. All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty. What is a small press? So the standard definition, the industry definition of a small press is basically any publisher with annual sales below 50 million, or those that publish on average 10 or fewer titles per year. Right, so this is what a small press is. So basically, yes, Inklings is definitely in this category. And different terminology that we use: indie publisher, independent publisher, small publishing house. We're talking about creating a publishing house. So let's talk about setting it up. Here we go into the nitty gritty of it all. Okay, so the first thing you got to do is to decide on a name, right? One of the things you want to do is to make it catchy and interesting. It might be something that you pick based on the kind of genre that you want to publish. There's publishing houses that are, kind of interested in being more of a full publisher where they publish all kinds of genres. And then there's some that are more niche oriented. There's some publishers like Cursed Dragon Ship that are definitely more speculative fiction. So, depending on what you want to do, you have to come up with your name. And then, you have to create a good logo, something that will be immediately identifiable, right? And then once you've gotten your name and you got your logo, you know what you're going to call yourself, then the first thing, the very, very first thing you need to do is go down to the county and do a doing business as, okay? A doing business as. The filing fee to register an assumed name or doing business as it's about 15 bucks. And it's very easy to do. You just go down there, you fill in a simple paper. You might be a sole proprietorship, which means you have just one single owner, or maybe a partnership if you are going in with someone else. And you just register it. It's valid for 10 years and you can renew it. This is where you want to start. Okay. Um, until you have about 5 years in the business and you're making some viable money and you've got a lot of, you've got authors under your belt, you really just need a doing business as. That's a good place to start. It also allows you to be able to file your taxes with just the very basic your own social security number. However, you do want to try to get an employer identification number. But this is where we start, right? Doing business as. Once you've got this piece of paper, then you can do many of the other things of like opening your bank account for your business and such. This is what allows it to be a business account. They're going to need this document in order for it to be officially a business account and not just under your name. Okay, so this is your first step to creating your imprint, right? Your publishing house. All right. Give me a thumbs up if I can switch or if somebody's still kind of taking notes. Is everybody good? Yes? All right. Off we go. All right, so that's the first step. Now, eventually, you're going to want to be an LLC, okay? A limited liability corporation. This is what protects you from in a situation of litigation, okay? Once you've really established your business, you're actually starting to make some profit, you've got multiple authors under your belt, you're going to want this LLC status because basically your personal assets are now separated from the company. Under a DBA, your personal assets are still at risk, because you're doing business as is just an assumed name, and so it's basically you. So if you own your house and someone were to come against you or whatever, in Texas not so much because we have homesteads, but if you owned other property, they could probably go towards those kinds of things in a litigation situation. So the LLC is really good for protecting yourself, and protecting your personal assets. And basically the LLC, it's I believe it's about $400 to file. It's you do it with the state of Texas, and it's a document that you just go on to the state, and you pull out the form. It's very easy to fill out. You can use a different name than you're doing business as for your LLC. You can join them, or you can just put your company name and just do that as your LLC. You need to have a registered agent, which means you have to have a physical address that can receive certified mail, because that's theoretically if somebody wanted to serve you, you need somewhere for any legal documents to be served on the company. You file a certificate of formation. You just basically download the form from the Texas State Department website. And then you prepare an operating agreement. Okay, an operating agreement just basically lays out the ownership of your company, who owns it, and the management structure, right? So it's basically your business management plan, right? Who is the president? Who's the vice president? Are there any directorships? Your employee chart, of the organization, and that's pretty much your operating agreement. How are you operating the company? You're going to need an EIN number at this point. You go on to the IRS for that on the website of the IRS, you obtain an employer identification number. And so this kind of gives you that legitimacy. And once you've got an EIN, then you will also be filing taxes differently, because, you know, for the most part at the beginning you can file as a sole proprietorship with your own social security number. But eventually you're going to need to file as a company, right, which is a different set of forms, which also allows you then to apply for other kinds of you know, small business loans or grants and things, for small businesses that you wouldn't be able to just under your own DBA. So this is kind of where you want to go to. I wouldn't worry about it right in the beginning. Some people just jump into it right away, and that's fine. I think it's not a bad idea to give yourself, you know, 3 or 4 years just to make sure that you're going to, you know, be able to make it before you spend the extra money, you know, doing all of this. Um, so the LLC is where you're going to go next. And so that does mean that you have to have some kind of business plan, you know, some kind of an operating agreement. You have to know how you're going to structure your company. Right. Filing taxes, you know, while you're in a DBA, like I said, you just basically are doing it as a home business, as a side business. With your SS number, you're still filing the basic same tax documents that you do all the time. You know, once you're an LLC and you have an EIN number, then you're going to file separately. You're going to file a kind of a company tax document. So just keep that in mind in terms of where you want to go with it. To incorporate or not to incorporate. So if instead of an LLC, you can do an Inc., right? And it's more money. It's about $800 to do an incorporation, still through the Texas State Department. And you know, the big difference, you know, it does kind of the same thing as far as protecting you from liability, but the biggest difference is that an incorporated company can issue stocks and it can issue shares. And when you file that documentation, you often have to say like how many shares or stakeholders you're going to have right off the bat. So this is something that maybe you transition into down the stream if you want to have like shareholders. It's not a bad idea if you want to bring in some silent investors, because you can do, there's different kinds of incorporations. There's S Corp and there's C Corp and there's different kinds. And depending on the different capitalists that you have funding you, if you have like investors, you might do one of these, and that will allow you to protect their interests and also to protect yourself, as far as like you have to have some bylaws, and you have to also say you know, who based on shareholders who has a voting voice in the company. The operating agreements are a little bit different, because then your shareholders would have, you know, you usually have like a shareholder meeting and things like that. So it gets a little more complex in terms of the documents that you have to file. You really don't need to incorporate unless you have investors. You know, if you have some investors, then you might want to, because that'll protect them, and that'll itemize how their shareholdings go, and what they have, you know, what they're entitled to. So that's an incorporation. All right, so what else do you need? Once you've got your DBA, you've got your logos, you know what you're going to call the company, you've registered it, then you're going to purchase your website, you know, make sure you have your domain name for your company, purchase, you know, hosting services. You don't, the two don't necessarily have to be together. You can do a GoDaddy domain and then do someone else to host, like WordPress, your website. Most of you guys have websites, so you're familiar with this stuff. You know, decide on your basic concept. What are some of the pages that you're going to do um, for your basic company website, right? And then you set up your business account. You go to the bank, you bring your DBA or your LLC paperwork with you, and you open up a business account. There's very different kinds of accounts. Some of them, based on how much money you have in there, and if you have a specific amount that is running all the time there, you can have some interest that you earn on some of them, or you don't pay certain things. And there's different things that you can look into in terms of different banking. Different banks offer different things. You have to set up your PayPal or Square or both, to sell your books. To be honest, as a publisher, it's not a bad idea to have these both, you know. Inklings Publishing has Square, which is what we use for sales to customers. So if we're at an event or on our website, we have a link to our Square store, and people can buy our books and they pay through Square. We can also invoice people, and sell books. We use the PayPal for our authors. On our website, we have an employee portal, which we allow our authors to have their own login. And when they go into their employee portal page, there's a PayPal button there that's separate from everything else, and that's where they buy their own books. They can buy their books at their author discount, because you want to be able to give them that. You don't want their author discount to be in the same place as the other store, because you don't want your regular customers to see, that authors are getting that discount. It's just it keeps it clean if you do two separate things for them to be able to use. And then for accounting purposes as well, you have the Square store, which is all of your sales to customers, and then you have the PayPal reports that are all your sales to your personal authors. And we also use PayPal to actually pay our people. So we use PayPal to pay our formatters and our cover designers and stuff. So it's kind of separating customers from your in-house employees, right? And so you can run your reports, and they're separated by type. How much you paid your people and how many books your authors bought is separate from your outside sales to regular customers. So I really enjoy using both, because that allows me to separate everything out. And then of course you've got your business stationery and cards that you want to buy. And depending on how many people are working with you in your company, you might buy cards for more than one person. If you have a VP or you have some staff that you want to give them their own cards. So these are kind of the next steps, right? The elements that you need to put into place. And once you've got all these different elements, we're going to talk about banking real quick. When you open up your accounts, you want to have your basic checking account, your business checking account, which is where you manage the funds for your company, right? You link it to your PayPal, then you're able to pay your people directly with PayPal, and it comes from the checking account. And this is your expenses, right? This is your purchases and expenses that you're going to have as a company. And then I have two savings accounts. I recommend that you have two separate savings accounts. The first one is for inventory capital, okay? The capital that you're going to use for your inventory. Every time that we publish an author, when we first release that book, we have a certain amount of money that we're going to invest in the first run of books. So we have that money set aside in this savings account, in the inventory account. Every time we make a sale of that book, right away, we put into this account how much we're going to need to replace that book. So, if you order from Amazon and it's $3 to get a book, if we've sold two, then we're going to stick $6 back into that from that sale, so that once you've got the initial inventory, you can reinvest in inventory, and you don't have to put added monies in. It's basically coming from your sales. Each time you sell a book, you're putting it back to orderings again. Does that make sense? So you want to always keep your inventory monies separate, so that you can always buy it again once you're ready. You don't want to buy every time you sell one, but you do want to have the money ready to go, and the sale feeds it. The other thing that we have is a savings account for our royalties. So every time we've got some sales, every month we make sure we have, how much of that is royalties, right? How much of that is going to go to our author, and we put that into a savings account. And when it comes time to distribute them, to run all the reports and put it all together, the money is there, and it's separate. It's a savings account that is not connected to anything. Okay. The savings account for the inventory is connected to the checking account. So when it's time to order books, you can transfer from the savings into the checking and then proceed with the order. The savings account for royalties, that's separate entirely, and then so when it comes time to give their royalties, their money is secure, and you never as a publisher want to be in a situation where you can't pay your authors, because you spent their royalties money. So you have to be very careful with that, so that's kind of one of the things that you want to think about, is having your money separated. And of course, the business account is separate from your personal account, and you make sure that you use the business account only for business purchases. So everything that comes out of the business account, any expense that you do with the business account, you can justify it, as a business expense. Which doesn't mean you don't sometimes buy coffee with it, because sometimes you have coffee with people as a business expense, right? Because it's part of the entertainment and PR and just making networking. So sometimes you've got some of those expenses, but you need to be able to demonstrate that that's what that is, so that the IRS, the IRS is, if you ever get audited, you want to be able to have clean books, be able to show that this is your business account and you don't commingle it with your personal funds, right? Which also means that you have to decide, for example, your car. Is it a business car? Is it going to be a company car, or is it your personal car, right? So you need to make that decision, so that you know where you're going to take your car payment from, right? And things like that, because you can make it your company car, and you can benefit from some tax opportunities if you lease a car versus purchase a car. So there's some things to think about as far as that goes in terms of banking. All right, so there's that one. Now you have to register as a publisher in different places. Okay, the first thing you have to do is go on to Bowker, however you pronounce that thing. I never know how to pronounce it. But this is the place you get your ISBNs, right? You open up your account and you buy your ISBNs as a publisher, okay, as a publishing company. And you use your EIN, or you use your DBA documentation to make sure that it's a company account. KDP does offer the free ISBNs. Again, you don't want to do that. You register your ISBNs every time that you publish a book, and you assign it an ISBN from the lot that you have. You go into Bowker and you label those ISBNs with that book title. It has a place for you to upload the cover and all of that. And this is really good because it does help in terms of feeding to, with the Library of Congress, with the bookstores, with libraries, registering them and actively keeping up with that on Bowker, loading them on there is a really beneficial thing. And of course, making sure that you have ISBNs for every format, right? If you're going to do a paperback and you're going to do also an ebook and an audiobook, every single one has a different ISBN. So as a publishing house, if you're going to start a publishing house, your best bet is to buy 100 of these. They sell them in a package of 100, and it's a really good deal when you buy them at 100. I can tell you I still have from my original 100. We're still working off of those. So it's a very worthwhile deal to buy them in that kind of bulk. And to keep up with it and go in there, and it's kind of tedious. So eventually you're going to want somebody to do that for you, to get in there and just upload everything and register and assign them to each book. So that's the first place you register yourself. And then there's the Library of Congress. So as a publisher, as a publishing company, you can register with the Library of Congress. So you register as a publisher, once you've got all your documents and you've gone on to Bowker and you've got your ISBNs and you've registered there, because you're going to need this, right, for your Library of Congress. Then you go on to this website here, okay, Publisher PCN, and you click on Open an Account. And, under the words electronic PCN, and then you do the application. You click on that, you fill out all the information. You are going to upload some documents and stuff, and then you submit. And then the Library of Congress is going to send you a little email that says that you've been accepted into the program, as a publisher. And that means that for every book that you add as a publisher, you get a Library of Congress control number for your book, which is a great thing to have, for being able to get your book into libraries, but also just as a publisher, that makes it really, really kind of cool that you're officially a publisher. So there's that step with the Library of Congress. Now, that brings up the question of, as a publisher, the copyright, okay? When you go as a publisher and you register your books as a publisher, you get a library control number. You do not get a copyright of the book, okay? That's not the same thing. So when you register your book, you're approved, you got your login, you got your stuff, you go in there, and then you click on the application, you fill in your information for your book. You are saying, but what you're really filling out is you're saying, I have the right to publish this book. Okay, this book is being published by my company. Okay, you are not claiming any copyright with that. Okay, you're just basically claiming the right to publish. So, and I'm just gonna give you a little bit of chance to jot this down if you want to. And then we're gonna talk about copyrights. Okay, as a publisher, there are some copyrights you will file, and then there's some copyrights that you may decide to just make your authors file themselves. Depends on how you want to do it. Okay. The author always keeps their copyright. Okay, the copyright of the book belongs to the author. You as a publisher have the right to publish it. That's what the contract, that we're going to talk about contracts on the next session, all the different kinds of contracts and different clauses that can get us into trouble. And but one of the things that is very important is that to always make sure your authors understand the difference between what they're signing. You don't have their copyright. You don't own their copyright. You just own the exclusive right to publish, right? Which means they can't go off and publish it by themselves or go let somebody else publish it, right? So it's important that your authors know who gets to fill in their copyright, okay? So I'm going to switch over here to copyright next. Because the author retains their copyrights, it's really up to you as a publisher if you want to file it for them, okay, and fill in that paperwork and pay the $85, I think, to file the copyrights for your authors. That's something you can do for them if you want. And that's something you want to put into your contract if you're going to do it as part of your service as a publisher. Or you can itemize in your contract that they need to make sure to file their own copyright. Personally, I think as a publisher, you should just do that for them, okay? Because that's just part of the service you're providing, right? To make sure and secure their rights. Because if anybody violates their copyright, you're the one that's going to have to fight it in court. So, it's good to make sure that you filed it. One of the things you will definitely own, oh, look, I misspelled copyright, works for hire, okay? If you have your cover designs, okay, your cover designs are works for hire. So you want to register that as a copyright, as a work for hire. You put on the works for hire page who did the work, right? The designer's name goes there, but you, the publisher, own that design, not the person who actually made it. Okay. And that's an important one, because if an author wants to walk off, break their contract or whatever, you own the right to that cover. They're going to have to go off and get their own cover or pay you to own that right. Okay, if they really loved it. So this is a work for hire. Covers are work for hire. In some instances, illustrators can be a work for hire. So if you have an author who comes with the text of a picture book, but they don't have an illustrator, and you get an illustrator for them, you will have to discuss with that illustrator how they're going to, what their contract's going to look like. Do they get royalties? Are they doing it for a flat amount of money that you're going to pay them for the artwork, and then the artwork belongs to you as the publisher? It does not belong to the author. It belongs to you as the publisher, as a work for hire. Okay. So that's something to really look at in terms of illustrators. We had a situation where we had a gentleman who pitched us a comic idea, an idea for a comic book. He didn't have an illustrator. So we found an illustrator and we did a contract, and we were paying for the illustrations. And when he wanted to go off and, he thought he was going to be a multimillionaire and publish it himself, and which of course didn't happen. But, he wanted to break his contract. So we negotiated the release of his contract. He wanted to take the illustrations with him. And we were like, no, because they're a work for hire and here's the copyright. So so then he tried to get a lawyer involved, and we presented our lawyer, and we won. But it's important to make sure that you filed those things right away, so that you have all the paperwork in case of you have an issue with if the illustrator is not the same person as the person who wrote the book. This is where you need to be really careful when you're pairing two people up. So these are works for hire, and that's the copyright you want to make sure you have for these kinds of things. All right, taxes. You need to file a sales tax permit. You need to have one for your company, okay? And you need to have it ready and available, because when you go to selling venues, you will be asked for it. Oftentimes when you fill out, I know I just filled out to different Comic-Cons, and they all ask for your tax number, right? Your tax permit number. You have to fill it out on the form and let them know. So you need to make sure you have filed your sales tax permit for taxes. The first year that you're in business, you will have to fill it out quarterly. You'll have to go in and submit quarterly. And then, you know, at the end of that first year, they will switch you over to a yearly thing, because you don't make enough money for them to process every quarter, not in the beginning. You know, at some point, once you grow and you're filing a sufficient amount of money, then they'll switch you back to quarterly, you know, once it's worth their while. But you do have to do it quarterly the first year. I did not realize that. I thought it was a yearly thing from the beginning, and then I got stuck with some penalties because I hadn't filed. So make sure that you do it quarterly the first year. Amazon and retailers, online retailers, they do collect the sales tax. They do process that. You really need to talk about that with your accountant and CPA, how they want to itemize that on your taxes. For the most part, you know, you really don't need to worry too much about that, because you're not going to have to go and file sales taxes in everywhere that Amazon sold your books, basically, you know, because Amazon takes care of that. You just have to have all the documents, you know, for that. But that's something that I would encourage you to just make sure with an accountant and a CPA, how they want to do that for yourself, for your final taxes, you know. All right, so coming kind of towards the end here. Oh yeah, that's our manuscript submission window, and then that's just me. So that's kind of what are the essential places to register yourself for, and talk about copyrights. So that's the main basics for this first session, and then of course we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of contracts on the next one. But I wanted to give time, make sure we had some time for questions, because this stuff can be kind of heavy, right? So what are your thoughts or questions that you have about any of this? If anybody has any questions.
Red.
I have one. In Texas, I also had to do a Texas franchise tax thing. I don't know if that's critical to all those states or not, but for Texas, I know I had to do that.
Yes, once you're an LLC, you have a franchise tax that attaches. And I mean, I really don't know in other states, but yes, Texas does have that. And they send you all the paperwork to fill out. And they Texas is really easy to work with as far as taxes, because they really send you everything in a timely fashion, and you just fill it out and send it to them.
And if you don't, I mean, generally you don't pay anything because we're not making that much to even cross the border. But
yeah.
if you're late, there's a $50 fee, even if you owe nothing. So it's one of those things you got to do.
Yes, and sales taxes too. You know, if you file your sales taxes on time or even early, there's like, they give you like a little bonus, like you can pay less. But if you file them late, they really stick you with those penalties. Yeah, they really want you to fill everything in properly.
I'm sure there'll be a COVID fee for all the taxes they're not making this year.
Yeah, yeah, that's one of the interesting things this year.
Fern,
Yes, Jeremy.
One of the things that whether you know about it or not, it is something I'm going to be coming up against as I transition back to Houston. The LLC for Successor Games is in California, and I don't want it in California. So relocating an LLC is a thing, and from what I understand, it's not that easy of a thing. And I'm willing to jump through all the hoops, because I definitely don't want my business to be located in. I was going to say something really nasty about California that I will just keep to myself.
Happy thoughts. Happy thoughts. Happy
thoughts. California doesn't need any more money than it's already getting. I'll just put it that way. So yeah. We're going to relocate to where I'm living. So yay. So if you know anything, yay, tell me. And if not, I will continue to look up the process, because I understand it definitely is a process.
Well, I honestly don't know what the process would be, because I've only ever filed it here. you know,
Yeah.
so I've never had
It's
to.
actually interesting because there is no LLC for you. You mentioned the LLC. You just mentioned them that Texas has franchise. Well, of course, California has state taxes. Franchise tax board takes care of all that, so your LLC is wrapped up in the state taxes. So you don't have we don't have state taxes in Texas, but you do if you have an LLC technically because you have the franchise tax. But California already has a franchise tax, so it's all be wrapped up in that. So it'll just be another thing to do. And the other thing though that I'll say, and I don't know how it'll apply, but it does definitely apply to me because there was a work for hire writer involved in so it's not just about illustrators. That's the only thing I want to say. Whoever is work for hire, make sure that that's real clean for you because work for hire is just work for hire and you own the copyrights to the work for hire, not the
Mhm.
person who did the work for hire. Even if they've done writing, they do not own the copyrights if it was work for hire.
Yes, and that's something we're going to really look at in terms of the contracts. When we do the contracts, we're going to look at just the basic writer's contract, right? An author's contract, what that looks like. And then we're going to look at illustrator contracts. We're going to look at work for hire contracts. And we're going to also look at some of the contracts that you sign with different people that do services, like your formatter, you know, you might
Even your editor,
your
you can.
editor.
I mean, I went as far as I made sure that work for hire was real clear on this stuff because that author tried to come at me and say, no, that's my work. And I had to come back hard and say, no, it's not. It is your writing, but it does not belong to you. All the copyrights are owned by the game and your work was work for hire. And it got a little sticky because of how the contract was written, but my lawyers still were able to smash it and say no.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, you do your best with the contracts to make them as specific and concise as you can to protect yourself. But there are some things that you have to sort of leave vague, you know, because you got it has to also
Accurate.
be flexible. And then at that point, when you have a legal situation, it's really who has the best lawyers,
Right, that you're not wrong.
you know.
And
But
I would so I'll say that about lawyers. You know, I happen to use so this is where I love California because California's IP laws are very and it's one so I of course I don't want my business to stay here. However, their intellectual property laws are so good in California because of this wonderful thing called Hollywood.
mhm,
And so they really, really take care of intellectual property to the nth degree, and their lawyers are fantastic. And so I think I will keep my firm that is in California because they just know through and through. So what I want to say about that is that if there is an IP associated with your work, which there always is, and you're really, really in any way, shape, or form concerned about that IP and what might happen to that IP, make sure that if you have a firm on retainer, which I do, that they are an IP firm because
yeah,
it makes a huge difference. A
yeah.
huge difference.
And the good thing about it is that most of that is litigated in a federal court.
Right.
So
It's
so
not
that
at state level. But
it's not a state level. So that does allow you to have attorneys that can
right.
practice, you know, across state lines. And one of the key things when you have a work for hire is to immediately, right away, put the copyright in, because the date the copyright is issued as a work for hire can become important for the litigation.
Yeah.
You know, you have to prove that you filed it and that it was accepted by the Library of Congress, you know, within a certain time frame. Um, and the same thing registering your books. By the way, as a publisher, when you register your books, you have to register the books before they are published for your Library of Congress control number. That is something you have to add in before it's actually published. And there is a process if it's already published, but it's trickier. They don't like it that much. They prefer it when you know are coming up and doing this ahead of time. But yeah, work for hire is tricky, but it's important, and it's important in terms of, I mean, we have beautiful covers, we have beautiful illustrators, we have work writers that you might hire as a work for hire, and that's very important to itemize that.
So I'll jump in with just a couple of comments. One is that the issue, well, first of all, I didn't follow Fern's order, very logical order. I did things differently. Like I wanted to have a business card and a right away and so forth. So I printed out my business cards as soon as I got my LLC. But anyway, back to some points. Fern mentioned this, but she went over it very quickly. For me, it was a real thing to figure out if I wanted to be an S Corp or a C Corp. And I had to talk to my tax accountant a lot to try to figure out which way to go. And that's after deciding I want to be an LLC as opposed to a DBA. And in my case, it was real clear, as Fern said, if you have assets to protect, then you want to protect them. And that way is to be an LLC. If you don't have assets, well, then, you know, they can't take anything away from you that you don't have. But if you do have assets like a house or savings or whatever it may be, you want to protect those.
Yeah, and that's where the LLC and or incorporating is really important. You know, in Texas, your house is a homestead, so it is protected to an extent. So you don't have to worry too much about your house as far as, you know, that goes. But there are other things. I mean, if you have, you know, retirement funds or a portfolio of any kind, or if you have other property that you own, it's definitely, you know, I mean, when I first started, I was judgment proof, people. I had nothing to lose, literally, you know, so DBA was fine, you know, but eventually, you know, you begin to grow. And the big thing too is, you know, the reason that I say to start there and then work up also is that you want to see if your business is viable. You know, a lot of publishing companies go under in 3 to 4 years. And so, you know, before they even reach year 5, it just didn't work, you know, for whatever reason. There's a whole lot of reasons why, you know, a company just doesn't work out. So, so you want to give yourself enough time before going into a real expense like that to see, okay, yeah, this is real. This is, you know, I mean, when I hit year 5 and we were actually making a profit, I was like, oh my God, it's for real. You know, I made this thing happen, you know? So that at that point, that's when you're like, okay, well, I better protect myself now, because now there's people also who know your name, right? Your name is much more out there. And, you know, and there's more likelihood that someone's going to just be frivolous about stuff, you know, and come against you.
And Fern, I don't know how you feel about what I chose to do it this way. I don't know how you choose to do it when it comes to, but you're dealing with the copyrights because they still belong to the author. Anyway, how I did all the work for hire stuff and whatever ended up being trademarks, copyrights, otherwise, are not in my name. They're in the name of the LLC. So they belong to the LLC. They don't belong to me. I mean, they do by osmosis because I'm the only sole proprietor of the LLC. And though the copyrights legally are bound to the LLC, not to me.
And see, but that works because it's a work for hire. So even though someone else may have written some of it, it's yours. It's different when you have an author.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So like let's say that you wrote a book and you were like, Inklings Publishing is going to publish it for you. You know, the only parts that we own are the cover art and whatnot, and then of course we have the exclusive right to publish it. So we would list you under our publisher on the Library of Congress, but you are the copyright owner of the actual words of the actual novel. And so that becomes, you know, so that is copyrighted under your name. In the copyright, since we file it in the copyright, it does give you a chance to put that you are the publisher, you know. So we're on there on all of our authors' paperwork, you know, we're on there as the publisher. At some point, however, you know, because the contracts that you sign with authors give you the right to publish them for X number of years. You know, that's a negotiable thing. We always ask for 10. 10 is a good number for return on investment, you know, in terms of like being able to get back the money that you're about to spend into this author. 10 guarantees that you're going to make some money from them. And so we usually do a 10-year. and usually it's renewed, you know. I mean, we haven't really gotten there yet because we're only on year 8, so we haven't gotten to a point of having to renew. But let's say that, you know, our first author, Meg, comes up on her tenure with her first book, you know, and decides, oh, you know, I just don't want to renew. Okay, so then at some point we will have to transfer the copyright and make sure that, you know, then it's removed, that Inklings Publishing is removed from her copyright as her publisher, and then she gets the other, you know, the full copyright as not having a publisher. And then of course that means that we also, you know, what she gets back is not going to be the formatted book, you know, because the formatting and everything of that's proprietary. That's proprietary material that you own as a company. She may get her edited book, the basic manuscript edited. She could get that back, but she's not going to get back the formatted files or any of that. And definitely not the cover, you know, because that's definitely a work for hire. So all of these things of copyright is important to itemize and to know who owns what, you know. But yeah, for you, definitely the company would own that, and we own all our covers, right? Inklings
Fern, I would
Publishing is
just
the
like to
owner of the
say-
copyright of that.
So that's another issue I wanted to talk about when you go into contracts and so forth. That'll be interesting to me because I have bought both my covers and my illustrations through third parties. In one case, Reedsy, and in the other case, Fiverr. So, and I signed a contract with Reedsy and with Fiverr, not directly with the illustrators or the cover artist. So I'm assuming that that's, what do you call it, work for hire, because I have hired this illustrator through Reedsy or hired the cover artist. But really, I haven't taken it to a lawyer and say, am I protected on this? I'm just.
You are, because Reedsy and Fiverr and those kinds of, and like the selfpub.com and their contract work, they have a contract with the artists that are submitting work to them. And so they are like the middleman for that artist. They are the one that negotiates with you, and you know, you really do it through them. But I mean, the company basically is protecting both your rights that they're selling you this cover, and they're protecting the illustrator, you know. So technically they're supposed to be looking out for both parties, and the documents that you sign should include you know, verbiage to that effect of what you own. It should, you know, you own royalty free because you paid a flat fee for your cover. So yeah, you should be protected.
No, that's what I'm saying. I have been assuming I am, but I haven't actually had a lawyer review those contracts, which brings up my next subject is I really looked for a lawyer here in Texas that specializes in intellectual property. And I got several lawyers I knew to go through their networks, and there aren't, at least that I was able to find. So I ended up hiring a lawyer who's based in Colorado, who's also an author. And so he does contracts all the time. And I mean, his contract came to me and it's, I don't know, 15 pages, which is a lot more than I need, I think it's a lot more than I need. But my point is what Jeremy was saying before, to find someone who knows intellectual property, I agree with. Because some of the lawyers here in Houston kept saying, oh, it's just a contract. You can get any contract lawyer. And I knew better than that. You know, I knew that there are all the kind of special provisions to do with books and publishing and that kind of thing. So I kept searching until I found this lawyer in Colorado. But still, I don't feel real comfortable. He's in Colorado. He's not someone I can.
It's federal law.
I know, but it's hard. He was hard to get a hold of. You know, he was hard to get him to agree to take me on as a client. And I really am not, you know, I'm not regularly consulting him because I'm just a small.
There's actually a really good firm here in Houston. I'll have to look up the name. I had it at one point. We have our own in-house lawyer, so you know, we don't look for that. But I remember seeing the firm that I'll look it up. I'll look up the firm that was.
Well, like I said, I went to several lawyers and they went to their networks, and I went to the Houston Lawyers Referral Network, and I did all kind of work. And nobody said, yeah, we specialize in publishing.
Yeah,
I
I
use
definitely
I
did
use
get it, yeah.
Julie,
I, I'm
you
sorry.
really just want to look for somebody who does TV, movies, that
Yeah.
type of work.
Yep.
They will be able to do books. My lawyer that I got, he actually does movies and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I agree.
And they cover all of the literary
Yep.
uh type of work.
Mhm.
So,
Creative
and I only
property.
go
They
to
just put it that
him
way.
when someone comes to me with a contract.
Yep.
He did my first layout. He looked over my first contract, said, yeah, you covered all the bases, everything's good. And then from there, I just write the same contract over and over. The only
Yeah.
thing that might change might be the terms. But when somebody comes to me with a contract, like somebody wanted to push my book for a movie or whatever, they wanted to shop it. But then when they wrote the contract and they sent it to me, I sent it to him and he was like, no, don't take it. It's a bad contract. So that's when I have to pay him for that. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So I
Well,
don't go to him too often.
here's the other thing I'll say. I use Legal Shield. I have for years, even before Successor Games, and I got to hand pick these guys who do the intellectual property. And with Legal Shield, I mean, I'm not trying to like sell something here, but I'm telling you, those guys are at my beck and call, and I pay my monthly fee, which for business is not inexpensive, but it's not exorbitantly expensive. And man, those guys they know their stuff backwards, forwards. I call them and they call me right back or right then. I mean, I've never had an issue where I felt like I was waiting or I was having to pay extra. I mean, of course, if we get into litigation, you pay them for the litigation. But still, it's very reduced.
Yeah. I had Legal
And
Shield
I
through
got
my
to
job.
handpick the guys who I wanted to use them, which I
Yeah.
went with
I had
Hollywood.
Legal Shield through my job because it
Yeah.
was like a benefit that they offered us.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it was like they would cover you in anything except drunk driving. If you had a drunk driving case, you're on your own.
You're on your own.
Well, Julie, it sounds like you should definitely maybe check out Legal Shield. They might
Yeah,
be
they
a
are
real good
good.
option, you know, for
Well, I paid my one-time huge legal fee to get a model contract, and I'm not having to pay a monthly fee. So, I mean,
There you go. That's what I did.
but I mean, once I take on clients or authors, which I hope I will eventually, that changes the situation. Right
Yeah.
now, I'm just more worried about someone like my illustrator saying, oh no, you have to pay me more money. No, I'm sorry,
No.
you got paid an upfront fee for doing this work. You did it. We're both happy. Sayonara.
So somewhere in your
Yeah, it's
contract,
work
it
for
should
hire.
say you're being paid for a one-time fee
Yeah.
forever. Yeah,
Yeah.
to use this
And-
book
and
or
usually,
use this
you know,
artwork forever.
if you went through a system like Fiverr and something like that, if there ever was some kind of issue, they would have to be the ones that respond, because you went through them. So they would have to be involved and mediate the whole thing. But you shouldn't have a problem with that. And one of the things we're going to talk about is like the key clauses, right? Things that are negotiable, things that should not ever be negotiable from a publisher's point of view, right? As a publisher, these are the things you absolutely need in there. And it feels weird, when you're talking to an author and you're saying, and they want you to negotiate something or they want to change something and you're like, nope, we're not doing that. And it feels weird because, you're like, are they going to
Things
walk
like
away
the
with it?
cover falls underneath the publisher's domain.
Mhm.
And you might negotiate or you might say, yes, I'll take a look at your cover, but the final decision always comes down to the publisher.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
you don't give away that right.
And even the final decision on the final edited version of the book that's going to be
Yeah.
published. I mean, you have to have the final say because you're the one that's going to have to market it and sell it. And it's going to be your brand. It's going to be your name on it.
Yeah.
So it needs to be good. And so there's a lot of things, and there's termination clauses. What if somebody wants to walk away? How does that look like? You have to have them. The writers beware, they hate them. They're always like anti-termination clause. But you know what? If you're a publisher, you've invested money. You've invested
Yeah.
money. You can't just say, oh, well, just go ahead and leave. I mean, you have to have some kind of, you're
Yeah,
expecting.
you're gonna have to get a little bit of this back if they
We
just want to
don't
walk
play
away
that
after you
way.
put
We
all that
ain't play
work
it
in.
that way.
No, I mean, 'cause it's different when you have a publishing company. There's some publishing companies where you pay them to publish your book. Okay,
Mhm.
those should not have termination clauses because you've paid them to do all the work. But if you're a publisher, you're an investor, you have invested money, you've put forth money to there's personnel that you've paid. Even if they're walking away before it even got published, you've paid people. You've paid developmental editors, you've paid copy editors, possibly, you've paid people. So, you need to figure out how that's going to look.
Yeah, you
And,
need to cover yourself.
and then of course you negotiate. I mean, I've had a couple authors who've decided that they're going to be bestsellers and they don't want to split their money with me and they're going to just go do it by themselves now.
Well,
And you know what? I've
have
always
people told me
negotiated.
that they wanted the last edit. They wanted the last edit on a book. And I
Wow.
was like, no, if that's the
No.
case, go publish it yourself.
Yep.
Yeah, no,
That's one of the things that I originally wanted, and of course, being a new writer and never having done a publishing contract or anything, James and I went back and forth a little bit before he just, says like, this is the standard contract, this is what it is. And I said, okay, I don't have a leg to stand on. I've talked to a lawyer who tried to push me for a little bit more, a little extra, and I signed the contract, and I'm happy I did. And maybe that's something to have a talk on at some point too. And for signing your first contract is, it's like, I'm in completely over my head. I didn't know what was going on. It's like, but I knew if I wanted to get published, I had to sign a contract. I just didn't know what a good contract was.
yeah.
Yeah, that's why I went to a lawyer to make sure I got a good contract going first.
Yeah.
And then I talked to Julie Browse and she beat me up on my contract, telling me, what, are you crazy? Are you giving that all that away? No. I was
One
like,
of the things
I
you
feel-
really want to do is, as a publisher, we're all authors too.
yeah,
So
Yeah.
as a publisher who is an author, you want your contracts to be fair.
right.
But you also have to protect your interests because it's your company and it's your money.
Right.
And so, when there's authors that want to break their contracts, I don't make it hard for them. I mean, I sit down and just negotiate like, okay, yeah, the contract says this is how much you have to pay me, but how much can you realistically pay me back? Right. And we negotiate it. I mean, you can't hang on to people either if they don't want to be with you,
Yeah.
so
It's just gonna make both of you miserable.
Later. Yeah.
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 But your contract should be fair. Now there's some really predatory contracts out there. I mean, that are really like not nice to authors at all. So, being authors ourselves, our contracts are going to be a little more, focused on
Yeah, a
fairness.
little bit more author friendly.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the point that everyone has raised, that authors think they're going to have a bestseller, is one of the bubbles that I seem to be continually popping when I talk to people about their projects, because then I just get down to dollars and cents. I say, okay, let's say we're going to sell your book for $10, just hypothetically. Okay, it's going to cost $3 to publish that book, so we're down to $7. Now I've got $7. Amazon or Ingram Spark or whoever are going to want to have some money for themselves, and besides that, then whoever puts it out there wants their 55%. So take $7 and take away 55% of that. So now we're down to like $3. Well, guess what? I got to get paid back something too. So realistically, you're going to end up with maybe, I don't know, $1 of the cover price. So how long is it going to take for me to get paid back the $2,000 I've invested in your book? Well, that's 2,000 copies we have to sell before I see a cent of profit. And it's like, oh my God, they just don't have any idea of the cost behind putting a book out.
Yeah.
And that's why I tell people if they want to be a bestseller, how many copies can you buy? Can you buy 10,000 copies a day? Because if you can be a bestseller tomorrow.
Yeah.
You can't, it's going to take a while.
Wow. Man, this has been a fantastic conversation. We're 7 minutes over 8. So if you guys need to go, that's fine. If the conversation keeps going, that's cool too. But I mean, it sounds like everyone's super excited about this contract talk. Well, it's not happening next week, but it will happen on the 22nd. So we have a gap because Fern has taken over, like we said earlier, the Houston Writers Guild, and that meets every first and third Monday of the week. So that conversation will be on the 22nd. So make sure that you're here to attend that, because I know you guys probably have more questions or comments or feedback that you're looking for. And so you can get all of those answered on the 22nd. And next week, we'll see who comes. We'll see who I pull out of the hat for next week, you guys. Like I have some emails going out there. So we'll see. I'm trying, Jeremy, to find a LinkedIn professional, expert to help you out. So hopefully they can speak next week, but it'll be interesting to see nonetheless. So other than that, are there any questions? We can keep the conversation going. I'm open. I just wanted, if anyone needs to leave, it is, 8 after the hour.
Fern, could you just repeat the dates for the Houston Writers Guild Conference, June, what was it?
June 11, 12, and 13. June 11, that weekend, June 11, 12, and 13. Yes, and we should be coming up on getting some information on the people that we already have some speakers that have said yes. And we've got, we have an acquisition editor from Texas Review Press. And we've got a literary agent already, and we're looking for a couple other agents. So yeah, it's gonna be exciting. I tell you, though, I don't know what I did. I should have just, stayed out. But
You got it, Fern.
I love this stuff. It's fun. So
The last thing I'll say about work for hire is the ultimate work for hire with no way around it. It is work for hire is an actual W-2 employee. And that was and I know that that's like not in the realms of possibilities for some small or whatever you're deciding to. But for example, Fern may choose to like hire a formatter if she has that much. And that formatter's work will never, ever belong to the formatter. It will always belong to Inklings because it's an employee. And with an employee, it is 100% work for hire. That's how I ended up getting fully around this whole writer's conversation with this person, because I had made him a W-2 employee. And therefore, everything he did was for Successor Games. And there was no question about it. It's all work for hire.
You could also make them contractors.
Contractor.
You
Yeah.
can make them contractors. Yes,
If
you
you
can make them
sign everybody on
1099
as a contractor.
employee. Absolutely. But I'm like, when there's like where the lawyers are just like, nope, there's no conversation to even be had. You were a
Yeah.
W-2 employee. There is no conversation. It was work for hire. It does not belong to you.
yeah, and we'll talk about that because you can do a contractor contract for a contractor.
Yes.
And that also clarifies that they're,
Correct.
even though you're going to give them a 1099, it still clarifies that work is yours.
And you only have to give them a 1099 if they make over $600 a year.
That's right.
Yes.
If it's less than $600 a year, you don't have to give them a 1099. It's up to them to
Except
file
for their
taxes.
Royalties have to always be 1099.
Yeah.
And this one more thing for me, Fern mentioned that taking on HWG is kind of crazy. Well, boy, do I understand that. I am in my last couple of weeks of running the Society of Rice University Women's Group. And I've mentioned before, we have an author series in the evening. So let me just tell everyone, our last author talk is on February 24th with Judith Little, who wrote this book, The Chanel Sisters, that's getting quite a lot of attention. So if you're free at 7 p.m. on February 24th, you can join our Zoom and talk with Judith Little.
Nice.
So anyway.
Nice.
Awesome.
Okay, well, if you send that out to me, I'll join.
Yeah.
Just put it out there somewhere so we see it.
Julie,
On
if you'll send
Facebook
me
or something.
if you'll send me the link to join, then I'll put it out in an email for everyone, all the members, if they want to join. I'll put it out in our email.
Okay, and it's free. It's totally free.
Wonderful. I love it. Well, you guys, if you don't have any more comments, questions, or feedback you're looking for, I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. And we'll see you guys all on Friday.
All right.
Great, guys.
Bye, you guys.